Today I found a turtle. I think it's called a leatherback turtle. I found one once before, but it was dead. This one washed up alive. Father had sent me down to collect driftwood on Rushy Bay. He said there'd be plenty about after a storm like that, and he was right. I'd been there for about half an hour or so heaping up the wood before I noticed the turtle in the tide line of piled seaweed. I thought at first that he was just a washed up tree stump covered in seaweed. He was upside down on the sand. I pulled the seaweed off him. His eyes were open and blinking. He was more dead than alive, I thought. His flippers were quite still and he held out to the clouds as if he was worshipping them. He was massive, as long as this bed, and wider. He had a face like a 200-year-old man, wizened and wrinkled and wise, with a gently smiling mouth. I looked around and there were more gulls gathering. They were silent, watching, waiting, and I knew well enough what they were waiting for. I pulled away more of the seaweed and saw that the gulls had already been at him already. There was blood under his neck where the skin had been pecked. I'd got there just in time. I bombarded the gulls with pebbles and they flew off, protesting noisily, leaving me alone with my turtle. I knew it would be impossible to roll him over, but I tried anyway. I could rock him back and forth on his shell, but I could not turn him over, no matter how hard I tried. After a while I gave up and sat down beside him on the sand. His eyes kept closing slowly as if he was dropping off to sleep. Or maybe he was dying, I couldn't be sure. I stroked him under his chin where I thought he would like it, keeping my hand well away from his mouth. A great curling storm wave broke and came tumbling towards us. When it went hissing back over the sand, it left a broken spar. It was as if the sea was telling me what to do. I dragged the spar up the beach. I then saw the turtle's head go back and his eyes closed. I had often seen seabirds like that. Once their heads go back, there's nothing you can do. But I couldn't let him die. I couldn't. I shouted at him. I shook him. I told him he wasn't to die, and I'd turn him over somehow, and it wouldn't be long. I dug a deep hole in the sand beside him. I would lever him up and topple him in. I drove the spar into the sand underneath in his shell. I drove it in again and again until it was as deep as I could get it. I hauled it back onto him and felt him shift. I threw my weight onto it, and at last he tumbled over into the hole, the right way up too. But when I scrambled over to him, his head lay limp in the sand, his eyes closed to the world. There wasn't a flicker of life about him. He was dead. I was quite sure of it. It's silly, I know. I'd only left him for a few minutes, but I'd only known him. But I felt like I'd lost a friend. I made a pillow of soft sea lettuce for his head and knelt beside him. I cried until there was no more tears to cry. And then I saw the gulls were back. They knew too. I screamed at them, but they just glared at me and moved closer. No, I cried, no. I'd never let them have him, never. I piled a mountain of seaweed on top of him and then driftwood on top of that. The next tide would take him away. I left him and went home. That night, to Rushy Bay this evening, at high tide just before nightfall, to see if my turtle was gone. He was still there. The high tide had not been high enough. The gulls were gone though, all of them. Didn't really know what made me want to see his face one more. I pulled the wood and the seaweed away until I could see the top of his head. It looked as if it moved and lifted. He was blinking up at me. He was alive again. I could have kissed him, I really could have, but I didn't dare. He's still there now, all covered up against the gulls, I hope, in the morning. I had to stop writing because Father came in. He hardly ever comes in my room, so I knew at once something was wrong. You all right, he said, standing in the doorway. What you been up to? Nothing, I said. Why? Old man Jenkins. He said he saw you down on Rushy Bay. I was collecting the wood, I told him, as calmly as I could. Like you said I should. I find lying so difficult. I'm not good at it. He thought you were crying, just crying your eyes out, he said. Well, I was not, I said, but I dared not look at him. I pretended to go on writing in my diary. You sure you told me the truth, Laura? He knew I wasn't, of course. Of course, I said. I just wished he would go. What do you find to write in that diary of yours, he asked. Things, I said, just things. And as he went out and shut the door behind him, he knows something, but he doesn't know what. I'm going to have to be very careful. If Father finds out about the turtle, I'm in trouble, and he's only got to go down to Rushy Bay and look. That turtle would be just food to him and anyone else who finds it. We're all hungry. Everyone's getting hungry every day. I should tell him. I know I should, but I can't do it, and I can't just let them eat him. In the morning, early, I'll have to go back to the sea. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but somehow I will. I must. Now it's not only the gulls I have to save him from.